Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. If you're like me, there are multiple times every week when you just look at a news story and say, wow, that is fucked up. And depending on what news outlet you're watching, it could just as easily be a comment on either the reporting itself or, in fact, the story. Or both. Well, in order to provide a cathartic release for all of those pent-up what the fucks, we're unveiling a new segment here this week, aptly called... This week's Fucked Fact has to do somewhat with the presidential election, but more with the normalizing of white supremacy and far-right extremism in this country. If you've wondered why there's so little talk of white supremacy, overt racism, and bigotry in a year when all three of those things have oozed forth from the cracks of common sense and justice like globules of lard through an apathetic sieve, well, it's because we don't call them that anymore. We call them AltRight, which has a cozy ring to it, landing uncomfortably close to all right, while being anything but. Originally coined in 2008 by Richard Bertrand Spencer, this guy, who advocates for, quote, peaceful ethnic cleansing and refers to MLK as a fraud and degenerate, alt-right is his name for a loose set of far-right ideals centered on white identity and the preservation of Western civilization. I'm guessing he doesn't mean the Western civilization that belonged to these guys before his Western civilization came and fucked it all up. Yeah, he must mean the other Western civilization, the white one. But this is an important distinction to highlight because it's at the core of the problem with the alt-right, and that's language. Calling these fucking lunatics alternative right, as if that was some hot topic, acceptable, possibly cool perspective that's just for the alternative kids who say, fuck PC. The language that we use to describe things may seem flippant, like, oh yeah, Eleanor, whatever, Western civilization is just what it's called, stop being so damn PC. Yeah, so don't confuse being PC with just being fucking historically accurate. No one settled the US, it was colonized. No one discovered the shit either, because as many comedian has pointed out, that would be like me walking up to your car, stealing your stereo, and then congratulating myself on discovering your car stereo. What that absolute crooked fuck Spencer means by Western civilization has nothing to do with hemispheres. He's talking about European civilization, which, spoiler alert Spency, also includes the Portuguese and Spanish, who populated much of Central and South America, and whose descendants are some of the very same people that you and your supporters think should stay the fuck out of our country. History's a bitch, isn't it? If learned and understood in a broader perspective, it kind of makes you question things like, why do we say Columbus discovered America? Or why do we say that it was just settled, as if it was some desolate lunar landscape? It also keeps you from making signs like this one. But learning is hard, and facts are mean, so alt-right. Meanwhile, we have everyone from Time to the New York Times to Vanity Fair to CNN chirping about the alt-right as if that's a real fucking thing. It's not. It's two words that only serve to soften white supremacists and sexists so that their message can get through to the broader majority without being stopped at the very first common sense and decency gate that reads, no racist, sexist pieces of shit allowed. Because once through that gate, your brain begins to normalize this phrase and the people behind it, so that you too might write in an Observer op-ed that the alt-right should really just be considered anti-political correctness run amok. Which sounds really cute, doesn't it? Like, oh, those little kids running amok with their swastikas at battered women. Giving the people who caution right-wingers to not latch on to the pro-life movement because it encourages, quote, the least intelligent and responsible women, who are disproportionately black, Hispanic, and poor, to have kids, while furthering principles we generally reject, namely equality and human rights. Giving these unbelievable mounds of putrid pus a name that in any way softens their horrific view of the world is a disservice to the world. And again, this isn't about being PC, this is about allowing extremism to be swaddled in language that smooths a sharp disrespect for justice and human rights. It's about allowing our mind and capacity for critical thought to be emptied, our common sense to be raped. It makes white supremacy seem less of a big deal if we only consider extreme racists and sexists to be anti-PC or anti-establishment. As Chris Hedges wrote in an article back in 2009, our crisis is a crisis of language. Victor Klemperer, in his book Lingua Terti Imperi, noted that the distortion of language by the Nazis was vital in creating fascist culture. He was repeatedly perplexed by how the masses, even those who opposed the Nazis, willingly ingested the linguistic poison the Nazis used to perpetuate collective self-delusion. Words may be little doses of arsenic, he wrote. They are consumed without being noticed. They seem at first to have no effect, but after a while, indeed, the effect is there. Language shapes the way that we think and how we understand the world. By shifting the way that we talk about white supremacy, we shift the way that we think about white supremacy. We allow it to factor into debates, as if anyone who claims that there's a white genocide should be given a national platform to speak their stupidity any more than the guy who thinks that climate change is fake, or the guy who started the dinosaurs and people lived at the fucking same time museum. Putting these ideas out into the world via quote-unquote respected media suggests that these ideas are solid, supported by facts and research. And look, I'm all for free speech, so if these fucknuts want to scream into an echo chamber of their own stupidity, please be my guest. But at a point in time, when white vigilante violence is on the rise, roughly 2 unarmed black people are killed by police a week, and black men make up 37% of the prison population, while making up only 12 to 13% of the US population, we have to recognize actual white supremacy and systemic racism as real fucking problems, and call them that. And that's just one of the tenets of white supremacy. The hatred of immigrants and any non-whites, plus the oppression of women, are also cornerstones of their particular brand of head-up-the-assism. And of course, women's rights and immigrant rights, also known as human rights, are also being threatened on the political stage today. So we have to recognize this arsenic that we take in when we talk about the alt-right. When we say shit like, well, yeah, Trump's a racist, but we are ingesting and spitting out poison with these words. We are slowly normalizing racism, sexism, bigotry, and the hate and violence that they perpetuate. We are accepting these platforms, ironically, in an effort to uphold free speech and make sure that everyone's voice is heard. But that's not how this shit works. Allowing people to speak is not the same thing as allowing them to shape the dialogue. The Westboro Baptist Church is certainly free to spew their hateful rhetoric, but that doesn't mean that you should have them over for career day at school just so you feel inclusive. Recognize hate. Recognize the call for violence and injustice, and don't let it slide past with a viscous verbal coating of poisoned honey. There is no alt-right. There are white supremacists, neo-fascists, racist, women haters, and yes, they're all fucking assholes, who base none of their viewpoints on fact or research, but instead on the knowledge that they are white, and most of them have a penis.